The One-Year Bible Storybook by Virginia J. Muir. Today's story comes from Genesis chapter 15 and 16. It's about Sarah. Sarai gets impatient. Abraham and Sarai were getting very old. They thought a lot about God's promise to make their children become a great nation. They wondered how that could possibly happen because they didn't have any children at all. They especially wanted a little boy, so Abram talked to God about it. God promised Abram that he and Sarai would have a son. God said, "I am your friend, and I will always protect you. Look up at the sky and see all the stars. Can you count them?" Of course, Abram could not count all the stars in the sky. No one can. But God said, "Not only will you have a son, but you will have so many grandchildren and great-grandchildren that their families will be like the stars, too many to count." Abram believed that what God had told him, and God was very pleased with him because he believed. Whenever we believe what God says, that makes God happy. Because she didn't have any children and was so old, Sarai became impatient for the son God had promised. She said her servant girl, Hagar, could be Abram's second wife, so a baby could be born into their family. Hagar did have a baby boy and named him Ishmael, but this wasn't the way God had planned for Abram and Sarai to get the promised son, and their disobedience brought much trouble into the family. Our next story is from Genesis chapter 17. Abram gets a new name. Several more years went by, and Abram was 99 years old. Then God spoke to him again. God reminded Abram of all the promises he had made to him before, and he told him those promises would all come true. He said, "Your name won't be Abram anymore. I want you to be called Abraham, because that means Father of Nations." Then God gave Sarai a new name too. She was to be called Sarah, which means princess. Then God made a covenant with Abraham. A covenant is a very important agreement that God makes with people. Part of the covenant with Abraham was that God would allow Sarah to have a baby who would be the promised one to start Abraham's great nation. Because Abraham thought he and Sarah were too old to have a baby, he laughed and said, "Surely you must mean that you are going to bless Ishmael." "I will bless him too," God replied, "but I really mean that Sarah herself will have a baby. You are to name him Isaac, which means laughter." This is Abram gets a new name in Genesis chapter 17.